The revolution's begun. The time to stand up has come. We are the rocking of the throne. We are the rocking of the throne.
Hi, my name is Victor Tiffany. I'm the co-founder of Revolt Against Plutocracy, and I'm talking tonight with Jamarl Thomas, who I ran into on his YouTube channel, talking about revolution. And I thought, I've got to talk to this guy. And so here he is. Jamarl, thanks for joining me.
Hello. How's it going? I am happy to be here. The Bernie or Bust guy himself.
Your YouTube channel is the Progressive Platform.
The Progressive Soapbox. Yeah, it's
Progressive Soapbox. That's right. I'm sorry.
You're close. Platform. So.
Right. So let's begin just real quick. People who may perhaps have never heard of you before, why don't you just introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah. So I have a channel on YouTube called it's under the name Jamarl Thomas. The Progressive Soapbox is the moniker I tend to go by. I've been doing this for maybe a year, essentially getting frustrated with the lack of context that goes on in the media and the news and so forth. And so my channel tries to delve into this idea of context with a wider perspective on a kind of a systemic view of politics, this kind of game theory of politics with a philosophical tinge. So that's essentially an encapsulation of my channel.
And we've never met before. We've never had a conversation about this before. So this is completely spontaneous. We may disagree. We may agree. This will be, in my view, kind of exciting, trying to see where you stand and how much we agree and disagree on what the problems are and what to do about it.
I am a complete prick when we disagree, so just giving you a heads up. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm going to be a complete asshole when we disagree. No, it should be interesting. Yeah, it should be interesting. I don't know all the details of your thinking on this.
I don't either. So
it should be interesting to see where this goes. Yeah.
All right. Let me begin with a question then, because I saw you talking about revolution on your channel. Why do you think the United States, or we, the people of the United States, need a revolution?
So, the question is really always boils down to either, are you going to be complicit or are you going to do something different? And, at a certain point, you look at where you are as a human being, and you look at where you are in regards to the context of the world, and you ask yourself, is this all there is? Like, I think that's somewhat of a fundamental question. Like, is this all there is? What are people meant to be? Gives it this kind of more esoteric look to it, but what are the ways that human beings can live their way or live their lives in this way? And is working 50 hours a week, at a job that you despise, is that really life? And particularly when you're talking about the context of a capitalistic society, ultimately your freedom in a capitalistic society boils down to your decision, your cash. Yeah, that cash is representative of your decision space in this particular society. One of the stats came out, it was like 60% of the public, if it had a $500 bill, couldn't afford to pay that bill. And that's, once you put that in context of a capitalistic society, depends on the amount of cash you have in your pocket, your decision space in your way, where you sleep, live, eat, all that stuff, purely dependent upon capital, cash. And you realize that the majority of the public is either on a poverty wage or in poverty. That's not life. Like, that's the opposite of freedom at that point. And this is not for lack of being in a wealthy country. This is the richest country on the planet. There is no reason. Like,
so, if capitalism is the problem, then what's your ideology? What are you, socialist, democratic socialist? What's the alternative from your perspective?
So, it's funny. My critiques of capitalism usually takes on a Marxist flair to it, but I am none of that. Like, ultimately, I look at this stuff from a very particular angle. I just say, from a humanistic standpoint, what should the world look like? What do I want the world to look like? And how do you get to that point? And I make that point because all of these ideologies, like, I don't have any hard and fixed ideology other than what is a life that a human being can live and conforming society around that. And I look at this stuff as, if we have the technical know-how to meet or exceed all of the things that we need in our society, then all of this stuff becomes a choice, meaning poverty, meaning people not having the things or to make the ends meet, wars. All of these things become a choice. Like, so at that point, it becomes, how do you get the society that you need? How do you get the society that you want? And how do you get that society from a humanistic perspective? And what does that society look like? I tend to conform around, I guess, this technocratic way of looking at this, where it's, let me say it this way. At a certain point, within 10, 15 years, most of these jobs will be able to be automated, just from a technical standpoint. I don't want a person doing fries. Like, I don't want a human being with all the potential that a human being has to be doing French fries or to be driving a taxi. If there's a robot that can do those things, I want a robot to do those things. The problem becomes us, meaning how we perceive each other and how we perceive our society and our place in the society. And in all honesty, people get into this mindset of work. Like, even in politics, when you hear them have these conversations and arguments, this usually boils down to, we need to find more jobs. We need to find more jobs. What if the point is not to find more jobs? What if the point is to actually live a life? And if you have the capacity for your society to meet those needs, find a way to meet those needs. Allow people to live their lives. If I had a ideology to conform around, it would be that. There is no God above forcing your society to be a particular way. This stuff is a choice.
That's pretty much not in alignment with both Marx on the left and Hobbes, who both of them thought men should work. I mean, that was their thing. But of course, they were before the mechanization and robotization of labor. So who knows if they would have the same perspective. Now, I don't know if you're aware, just to take a little.
Oh wait, just to touch on that, Marx did kind of make this argument of automation and eliminating jobs. Like, you're getting to the point where the capitalistic system falls. I disagree with him on this idea that people are just going to rise up and run to their post offices. But you do see this thing where automation eliminates the amount of labor that takes place. Let's say during Marx's day, it takes a while to make a suit. Whereas today, they can, on one assembly line, probably make 1,000 suits within the course of like an hour. At that point, you're beyond scarcity. Like, this idea of scarcity doesn't apply. I mean, we're literally to the point where we have advertising in order to get people to buy more than what they need. It's like, shopping and all this other stuff. Consumerism just becomes this kind of segue in order to keep your society going. It's like, for instance, I buy a laptop. This laptop goes bust within a year and a half. The laptop doesn't have to go bust within a year and a half. They make it that way because the company will run out of money. It will run out of business if they made a laptop that will last for 10 years. The system itself propels this kind of destruction of resources in order for people to continue to just work, to be on a hamster wheel. I mean, it's this amazing thing. It's like, dude, spending 40, 50 hours, the best time of your day.
And you would hope that actually you can have technology that works. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but you are frozen. You haven't moved in video in about 5 minutes. Why don't you turn your camera off and back on? Don't leave the studio. There you go. You did leave the studio. And you're back.
Is it any better?
And you have a black screen. There you are.
Any better?
Yes, I can see you moving now.
Okay, good.
So
it's so weird.
I don't know what happened, but I think a little bit of motion is a little more interesting than it was almost like you had called in on the phone. So when it comes to revolution, whether it's a job for everyone, if that's even possible in our system, the way that it's mechanizing and moving toward the outsourcing of labor and the mechanization of labor, or if it's a minimum standard of living for everyone, right? So you don't have to work at all, and I think that's where you were leaning toward. Either way, whichever way you think of it, what do you see as the obstacles of revolution? What's in our way?
So, just let me touch on the work thing. There is no situation where society is going to get rid of work. Like, it just means what you define as work in that case, if that makes sense. Like whatever. Look, I don't think anybody. I have a person who I know who's a journalist. She's in another country, And she kind of made this point, like, you know, if it wasn't for the social safety net in this country, I wouldn't have been able to do this job as a journalist. Like this idea of having a floor for people to do the things that they want to do, particularly if you have automated a lot of the stuff. The hedge to revolution is human beings. Like, and I know that sounds so trivial, but it's absolutely true. Like when we're looking at us and we have this idea of what society should look like, well, you kind of, history sticks to itself. People for the most part do the same thing that they've always done. And I think along the ladder itself, each person is bribed to a certain degree. Like you're prodded along. If you don't do X, you're not going to get your needs met. Well, I care about me, it's my family. Along under this idea of the system is not perfect, but if I do X, I'll be able to reap the benefits of Y. Well, that is not necessarily true anymore. It's not necessarily true anymore. I think it takes a difference in perception in the way we see ourselves as human beings and the way we see the society itself. And until that changes, I don't know it's like, how do you get over that hurdle of getting people to kind of wake up in this way? That's the hurdle. I honestly believe that's the hurdle in this. How people perceive themselves and how people perceive what's fair in their society. This kind of hegemonic view of markets being more important than human beings and the majority of the population accepting it.
Are you familiar with Caitlin Johnstone's writings?
I am familiar with Caitlin Johnstone's writings, and that's exactly what I was talking about.
One of the things she recommends strongly, I mean, she's really waging a one journalist war against mainstream media. And so her approach is, one way to get people to wake up is to stop sleeping by watching mainstream media, because it's just not informing us. It's certainly not providing. Obama talked about politics in the United States functioning between the 40-yard lines, and that's where the media operates too, is between those 40-yard lines. They don't. I remember during when Trans-Pacific Partnership was actually something that might be coming along down the road. You never saw.
Oh, there you are.
Cutting my head off.
Come on back. Come on back.
All right.
Okay, I think he's trying to come back. There you are. I was like,
I'm still cutting my head off. You look like you're frozen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Let's
You are frozen, right? And you're going to lock out again, and you're coming back. One more time. There you go.
Come on. There you are.
Wow. Well, this is technologically smooth.
Yeah, I know, right?
And it was such a distraction, I forgot what I was talking about.
You're saying politics being beyond the 40-yard lines. The media is completely not informative in regards to real.
What platforms like yours provide is a perspective beyond those 40-yard lines, right? So that people can start understanding, gee, we need a revolution. And it's not just because cops are shooting innocent people in the streets and on the job. It's not just because of the issues of Black Lives Matter. There's a whole wide range of concerns having to do with everybody's crappy job that's unstable and uncertain and insecure. And the possibility that we can actually maximize freedom by not working, not having to work for a living.
Yeah. Or not necessarily being alienated from your labor. Let me put it that way. So not saying not to work gives it a weird connotation. Not being alienated from your labor. Like you get up in the morning, man, you're not compelled to do something because you're forced to do it because you're not going to, eat or sleep or be laying on the street if you don't necessarily do it. But you're doing it because it's something that you want to do. In any society, you're going to have some level of work. So, I don't know if there's any situation you get away from it. I think you can society, and I think you can try to make sure that the people have their needs met in that society by focusing on those things. For example, they have a food production. It's like we have all these abandoned buildings in Richmond in this area. Turn those things into grow rooms. And when I don't mean like pots, these things, high quality, nutritious, et cetera, et cetera. Even this thing of solar panels. They're just trying to get people energy independent, where they're not necessarily a chain. These are things that people can do, practical solutions that public policy can do to be more free. I mean, I think that society doesn't look at it that way. Society says, do XYZ, go to school for this time, get a job, work that job until you're 65 years old, and you're free. You're in this free society. Don't you feel awesomely free by working 50, 60 hours a week, working yourself into poverty? Look, the media thing, you're right. She's right about the media, by the way. They have conversations in very narrow bandwidths. So, for instance, and they fundamentally agree on certain things. So if you're talking about issues of military, they agree, hands down. Donald Trump, they call Donald Trump everything but a child of God. Donald Trump fires off an illegal missile strike into Syria, and they are worshiping Donald Trump. And you're like, that's illegal. Like, nobody asked the question, wait a minute, what authorization does the president have to just fire off a missile strike when nobody's being threatening us? Off the table. They don't mention it. Even these conversations around, I'll give you an example. They had a 60-minute story. I think it was 60 Minutes where they were talking about Yemen. At no point in that story did they mention that the United States, it's very bizarre in the way that it obfuscates certain information while emphasizing other information. But the real issues of military policy, you do not really get an honest broker in regards to media in this regard. Yeah, she's right.
So I think it's clear that one of the obstacles to revolution is this corporate media complex that we have. And it's not just Fox News, as I actually thought for a good number of years that they were the enemy. It goes all the way over to MSNBC and even PBS. I read, and I'm still reading, an article by Lee Camp, who was attacked by public broadcast system. I was astonished that they would go after him that way. And it's clear, that the corporations just don't want to hear this criticism, and they will sick their medium watchdogs after critics like Lee and the RT channel as well.
Yeah, they have a vested interest not to. You have your system is ensconced in cash. Like, whether you're talking about the political apparatus or the media apparatus, both of these things kind of function in tandem to create this idea of the establishment. Like, and so if you owned a media company, would you put anything on that air? Would you air anything? Would you hire anybody? There would be a threat to that media company at all in anything. Where, for instance, if part of your company owned GE or owned some kind of stock in GE or some kind of weapons manufacturer, are you going to say anything that's going to adversely affect your interests, your corporate interests? Of course not. The media is going to give you a very narrow view of the world that suits their interests. And I have to be honest, for them to do anything else wouldn't make sense. Like, from a financial standpoint, they're in this to make profit, just like anything else. They monetize their realities. So, yeah, they're going to do what they have to do to maximize their profit. And if that means not giving you anything that would get you pissed off at them, they're not going to give you anything that's pissed off at them.
Right. Let's set corporate media up as one of the obstacles to revolution, and the way they frame information and not even mention other information that's out there people could learn something about if they'd only have that information presented. Another obstacle, and you just alluded to it about the relationship between money and politics in the media. There's a trend with younger people that get their information off the internet. So we're in a period of time when we're transitioning from when most people get their information about candidates and campaigns. Oh, we lost you again, but I'll just keep framing this question, or maybe you can't even hear me until you come back on. So hopefully Jamarl will be back with us here in a moment. I wonder if his computer died. May have to pick this up another time. He can't get back on. Here he comes.
There we are. My camera dropped out. I am having bizarre technical issues with this.
Yeah, your audio's a little strange too. So let me get back to, you alluded to the relationship between money, politics, and media. And of course, what's called electioneering communication, which is broadcast, cable, and satellite, is very expensive. Even radio are fairly expensive ads to run compared to what's available online. So as far as the obstacle to media, obstacles to revolution, is the cost of media, the cost of electioneering communications. Am I right about it? You see the cost, just finances and big money in politics is one of the major obstacles to revolution.
Yeah, I mean, it's this. One of the big conversations that's going on is about this reformist in the Democratic Party. This idea of, do you reform it or do you do something new? And part of the big issue with that conversation is, look, the Democrats are not supposed to be a big tent party. Parties are not supposed to be big tents. You have this idea of, you have plutocrats and you have progressives or lefties in the same party. And up for the past 30, 40, 50 years, they may say one thing, but the person who they're leaning by or who they're leaning against is the cash. I mean, I've always make this point. It's dollars or pitchforks. And ultimately, you don't have pitchforks. You have dollars. And these guys are getting bribed to a magnificent degree. What's that guy, MSNBC, that plutocrat, comes on television and is saying, I called Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and I told them to shut up about this talk about class.
Yeah, he's a billionaire.
Yeah,
I saw that. It is amazing. I actually forwarded that video to Steve Hilton. He is the host of The Next Revolution, which is probably the only show on Fox that's worth watching. Fox News. He's on Sunday nights.
Yeah.
And I thought he was going to cover it on his next show. He was pretty appalled by it. It's the most blatant example of corruption I've seen on television in my entire life. It was astonishing. You got a billionaire saying, "Hey, don't, this is aspirational. Don't denounce billionaires."
And
if you do, Chuck Schumer, if you do, Nancy Pelosi, well, I'm just going to stop contributing to the Democratic Party. And I just thought, wow, why don't you just hold wads of cash in your hands while you're saying this? It was true. It was the most blatant and clear example of plutocratic corruption I've ever heard on corporate television in my life.
It's mind-blowing. I could not. It's one thing for these guys to stuff money in their G-strings from the shadows. It's like, yes, this guy's getting $1 billion running the election. I know this guy's being bribed. It's another thing entirely to come out on national television. You feel so safe where you're like on national television screaming in the camera, shut up about class. It's like, how dare you have this conversation about class? I will close my wallet if you guys say anything else about class. And same thing on the Republican side, where the guy said, the Republican, I can't think of the guy's name, but it was like, if you don't pass this tax bill, don't call us. Like these guys are literally out there saying, I am giving you cash to affect my agenda. Whether that agenda is for you guys to shut up about class, or whether that agenda is essentially they pass me a tax bill to, remunerate us for all the billions that we've given you guys over these years.
These are two examples of what Page and Gillums wrote about in 2014 in their study on the last 30 years. Right, this is mainstream political scientists who are pointing out that Congress policies passed by Congress do not reflect the will of the people. They reflect the will of special interests and the plutocrats.
The Princeton study, yeah.
Yeah, the Princeton study, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but this is one of those things where it's like intuitively people know. Like it's certainly like if you ask just a random person and you say, do you believe Congress is working in your best interest? It is a very minor percentage that would say yes. I mean, most people assume that, yes, these guys are screwing us over and they're not working in our interests. But it's more blatant for them to be on national television, snarling and screaming in the camera saying that you need more money and shut up about class. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And look, and if the Democratic Party is not going to talk about class, who is? Like, if that's not their wheelhouse, if that's not the philosophical responsibility of what's supposed to be the left in this country, then whose responsibility is it? Now, I've made this contention that the moment some people make the argument Jimmy Carter, but definitely with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was the first Democrat to outraise a Republican in a presidential election. And Bill Clinton turned around and did some of the most right-wing policies. I mean, you're talking about NAFTA. Part of the reason Hillary Clinton lost was in those particular areas. They remembered that Clinton name with stuff like NAFTA. I mean, granted, Obama was still trying to push the TPP at the exact same time. Hillary Clinton was saying, shoot, she didn't want to push the TPP, but fair enough. But if you're talking about the NAFTA, you're talking about the crime bill, you're talking about that quote unquote welfare reform that essentially kicked 70% of those people off welfare were kids. Bill Clinton was doing some gross, disgusting stuff in that office, and like right-wing stuff that right-wingers wouldn't have been able to do. Like he had the political clout being a Democrat.
Yeah. We agree. In fact, I would argue that these neoliberal Democrats are actually more dangerous than Republicans because, you know, you have someone like Donald Trump in the White House, and everyone on the left understands, oh, this guy's bad. He's going to be bad. right. Even though he's basically doing not much different than the Democrats did. I mean, there are some variations. I think he most closely resembles Ronald Reagan in policy-wise, not style-wise in any way, but policy-wise, he comes close to just another far-right Republican.
He's just a Republican. People keep saying like they want him impeached, and I'm like, what do you think Mike Pence is going to do in the office? Like people mistaking this idea of tone for actual substance. Like, oh my God, Donald Trump is gross and the country fell off a cliff when Donald Trump took office. And you kind of make this point. I understand Trump wants to ban Muslims, but you understand that Obama was murdering those same Muslims. It's like,
yeah, right.
It's like, be honest. It's like,
I want to just go back to that point because I make this point in Bernie or Bust, which should be coming out in a week or so, the book. We don't want Trump impeached. You're absolutely right about Mike Pence is a far right religionut. And the difference is, I mean, they're both would be very bad. There's no question about it. I think Mike Pence would be a little worse. But what really I find particularly scary about Pence is that he's probably a lot more effective and efficient than Donald Trump. One of Trump's assets is that he's so incompetent. He's just not getting much done. And I think that's a good thing when you're on the far right or the right, wherever he is out there. At the way he is, I think you don't want somebody who's good at doing what he's trying to do.
Agreed.
It's great that he's incompetent.
Agreed.
He may stumble into a war that way, but
that's my fear. That's my fear. Like the John McCain, they don't like him. Like, you know what I mean? It's one of those things that I think some of the stuff they've done just to spite him. John McCain vote environmental policy, getting rid of environmental regulation. John McCain doesn't care about environmental regulation. He hates Donald Trump. And just the healthcare thing. John, some of these guys just dislike Trump. And because they dislike Trump, you're getting this kind of this level of incompetence with regards to them trying to get stuff done. That's an asset. That's an asset. My concern is stuff like North Korea, where and look, this wasn't a safety thing with Hillary Clinton either, though. Hillary Clinton was going to start another nuclear war.
Right. I think where Trump might accidentally stumble into nuclear war, I think she was probably going to go into it intentionally. I thought she was more dangerous. We made the argument she was more dangerous than Trump. And our general election hashtag was Jill, as in Jill Stein, Jill or boom. Let me go back to these obstacles. All right. So basically we're looking at corporate media and their very narrow 40 to 40 yard line perspective and conveyance of the truth as they see it from the establishment perspective. And then, of course, the cost of operating on that media in electioneering communication.
Yeah.
So now my question is, and part of it you've already answered by having your own YouTube channel, but how do you overcome those obstacles? And let's just take them on one at a time. And in a way, we've referenced this with regard to Caitlin, but let's maybe drill down on how do we offer a counter approach or an alternative to the mainstream media when it comes to expressing the need for revolution in this country. So,
you know, probably one of the most interesting things that I think I've seen over the past few years has been this kind of new media. And fascinated by it. Sometimes when you're on your channel, you're not sure if you're just kind of... What I did see was when this thing came up with the DNC leaks, and the lefties were screaming at the top of their lungs like, this was a leak, not a hack. This was a leak, not a hack. You have right wingers. This is a leak. And back to that, like over and over and over again, as if, well, if this was an issue that we've already settled, why are we continually going back to this particular issue? I mean, literally hitting it over and over. Their narrative wasn't breaking through. Like, it wasn't one of those things where the narrative was as effective as a narrative would be, let's say, 20 years ago, where people would just kind of trust what's taking place. Some of this, they brought it on themselves in the sense of people just distrusting media just because media has shamed themselves over and over again. Like, they have weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Well, no, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. He took this country into a war. So some of this they did to themselves. But undermining, and see, this goes both ways, man. This could be positive or negative. But undermining what takes place as the normal view of the world and challenging that particular narrative of what's the view of the world and giving secondary perspectives and honest perspectives, not, this bogus Fox News type perspective, but an honest perspective that's based in a different philosophical view of the world. Meaning, what is the perspective from a humanist when they're looking at these matters of war? Well, I could tell you they wouldn't necessarily agree with this idea of attacking Syria just willy-nilly or sending military assets to undermine the Syrian government or going into Iraq and this stuff. It's a different view of the world. Like, Chomsky gave a really good perspective. He was on Hard Talk, this show in Britain. And they asked Chomsky, he says, it doesn't seem like your ideas are all that popular. And Chomsky was like, my ideas are not in the news. Like, he said, my ideas are not up for the conversation. Like, these are not things that are put before the public for the public to see and have these conversations about. If it was, I would say if you gave the public an option between no war and war, the public will kind of choose a better option.
That again goes back to the whole question, the whole problem of corporate media operating between the 40-yard lines. You don't hear Chomsky on corporate media, and you don't hear Ralph Nader on corporate media. And I have to actually interrupt again. Your video is frozen again.
Oh, my camera is acting up. All right, let me kill and come back. Give me 1 second.
I will hold my question.
I'm sorry. My camera is doing weird things. I'm going to have to update the
That's
car.
okay. It didn't take that long. So when it comes to alternative media, and I list a number of them in the book that's coming out, Burn Your Bust, what are your recommendations for alternative media that's informative, other than, of course, your own YouTube channel?
My own channel. So I love Real News Network. Absolutely love Real News Network. They do stories on some of everything, and they give, even when I disagree with the perspective is coming from a particular perspective that I at the very least agree with. Real News Network, Democracy Now! I like Democracy Now! People dislike TYT, but I like TYT Politics. I think they tend to be solid when they're covering this stuff kind of, on the political circuit of the politics part. In regards to print, I read some of everything in print. Oh, RT, by the way. I like RT. Now, it depends on what it is. RT has its bias. You always have to know where the bias is coming from. RT's bias is on this anti-imperialism thing. It's this thing of what's the safest scenario for Russia? Well, the safest scenario for Russia is to have a non-imperialist United States, not kicking over countries and all this other stuff. So the perspective they put out tends to be in that particular direction, with other shows every so often saying Russia is awesome and don't, Russia.
I think that's the safest perspective from most Americans, too. We just don't get informed as to why that's the case.
Right. And it's one I agree with. It's like, once I understood the bias, it's like, okay, yes, some of their shows is like, okay, they're being pretty heavy in regards to getting this kind of Russian stuff out. But the basic lefty case of, I don't want us going into these other countries, and I want a different perspective on us. Like none of this, like CNNs, MSNBCs, these guys agree on the world the way the world is. I want a different perspective, and so I like these other sources. I like, in regards to print, I like some of everything in print. The Guardian, love the Guardian. The Guardian's one of my favorite.
Yeah, just real quick, there's one that you mentioned in the interview last night with Kelly Lane. One of your favorite commentators on YouTube is?
one of my favorite commentators on YouTube. Oh God, I don't know. You put me on the spot. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Jimmy Dore.
Oh yeah, I love Dore.
Yeah.
Love Dore.
Yeah, he gets it. He's clearly was Bernie or bust. We tried to get him to come to speak at the Bernie or bust rally, but he ended up staying off stage and covering the rally and interviewing the various speakers.
I love Dore, man. Dore is hilarious, and it's like hilarious in this way where it's somewhat cathartic, where he's making a good point. There are times where I've disagreed with Dore, and I've kind of made those disagreements. But all things being equal, yeah, I like Dore, man. I like Dore.
Yeah.
Dore is probably one of my favorite.
I don't disagree with him very often. So back to writing. Guardian.
I like the Guardian. So it depends on, again, this is one of those things we have to know the bias of where they're coming from. Articles from either Post, Times, and some of this other stuff. But again, you have to know the bias, because sometimes these guys can take a perspective that's somewhat jaded, if that makes sense. Let me see. I'm trying to think of who else. Guardian, love the Guardian. Truth Dig, I love Truth Dig. What's another one? There's another one. I read a lot. I can't think of it. It'll come to me. We're going to be talking. It's going to pop in.
One of the publications I enjoy, probably the only one on the right, is called The American Conservative. It's intelligent. I don't often agree with it, but it's not this kind of crazy nonsense you hear on Fox News or Town Hall or Breitbart. It's very, very intelligent, and sometimes I do agree with it. It's good stuff.
It depends. Yeah, it's hard. I have to be honest. It's hard to find a sane right-wing perspective sometimes. Like if they throw out so much chum between Democrats and Republicans, where you find yourself, once you're out of the party system, where you're like, okay, I don't have a dog in this hunt, that you find that, well, yeah, there's some things that right-wingers say that are true. There's some things Democrats say that are true. The problem is that both of these guys, for the most part, agree on the world the way the world is. They just agree to varying degrees of that. Yeah, I have to be honest. It's somewhat hard to find a good right-wing source. I may come across an article that may be from like a right-wing source.
That's the end of my list. That's the beginning and the end of my list. American Conservative. And also, Jamarl, once again, your video's frozen.
Oh, I don't have time to change.
Maybe a webcam upgrade. Time to revolutionize your hardware.
There you are.
And you're back.
Yeah.
So let's address then more of the. So we talked about overcoming the obstacles to corporate media by referencing alternative media. And
by the way, that's going to die on its own at some point. Like it may take a while. When you look at the main news shows like MSNBC, CNN, all of these guys, the people in like the average age of the audience is ancient. So what you find is that the younger demographic, the 40s, 40s, 30s, 20s, they're online. Like they're literally online. That's where they're getting their information.
There's a great chart about that. I posted on our Facebook page about 4 months ago. You have to really scroll down for a while. But it shows charts of the retired generation, boomers, Gen Xers, and each one, all of them are getting more media online. Even retired people who are older than the baby boomers, even they are slowly getting. But most of their information still comes from television. And then you get around the 40 years of age, and all of a sudden, most of the information is coming from online. So I think that does represent a generational shift that's underway toward people listening to people like you and I more than who's on television. These pundits, supposed pundits that you hear on
Matt
Al and Chris Hayes and any of her guests
Crapless,
or their guests. Yeah, we're definitely transitioning toward a more widely. There you go again. A more widely just ideologically distributed sort of media platforms. Let me talk about the other obstacle to revolution, which is money in politics, the cost of advertising on television, and ask you specifically about how do we overcome that obstacle? How do we get around the problem of money in politics when it comes to supporting a revolutionary candidacy or a revolutionary party?
Yeah, that one is slight toughie because that one depends on people. I mean, that's not as simple as, you know, it's political strategy. Ultimately, if somebody is getting paid to do something, that person is essentially your system is ossified. You know, you have both parties, they're playing games with each other from the standpoint of politics, and it's not really doing the business of governance. They're just kind of, you know, playing these political stunts. So it depends on the candidate. That's the first point. But I would make the point. I've made this argument for the past. Wait a minute, 1 second. For the past few months, that body that doesn't represent your interests, and I've come to that simple conclusion just because it's like, if Hillary Clinton wins or won in 2016, and during her term in office, she privatized Social Security. She got us into a war in Syria. I mean, put American troops in Syria. She passed the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Let's say she did just ghastly stuff. And in 2020, she's running against Ted Cruz. How many people are going to make the exact same argument that they made that, well, you have to vote for Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump because, I mean, Ted Cruz is a maniac. And it's like, if that's true, then nothing that she's done in that office mattered. Ultimately, these people are just Democratic functionaries. It means your vote becomes perfunctory. Your vote doesn't matter.
I don't know. I have to say, I'm getting an echo now. But if Cruz had won the Republican primary, I think we might have been very tempted to call off Bernie or bust. He's the only one that scared us that much.
He terrified me. Ted Cruz was terrified. But this is my point. Like, you were put into the situation where you're like, am I going to be complicit in this system, or am I going to say no? And should the Democrat get a pass for doing bad things? Like, should you reward bad behavior? It has to be more than just grading on a curve. And we've moved further and further to the right as this country has gone. We've allowed labor unions to get crushed. This idea of healthcare in college. Do you know, it's like the amount of money that we put in just as an addendum to the already bloated military budget would have paid for school. We have nothing. Like, when you're talking about infrastructure, you're talking about services as compared to Europe. None of that stuff. We spend like a year on military, while services, infrastructure, and all that stuff takes a hit in the country itself. That's problematic. The question is like, how do you get change in a system that doesn't really want to change? That's, in fact, is even paid not to change. Like,
we have the internet, right? This is an amazing communication machine, and we may lose good chunks of it. We may find it's not available in certain elements or certain aspects of it now with net neutrality flushed down the toilet. But we still have it. I mean, email's there. Social media's probably going to linger, even though this can be very restricted. Those of us who are promoting Bernie, or even and especially Bernie or bust, know how quickly you end up in the Facebook jail if you post something on enough groups too quickly. But this is nevertheless a machine. So one of the approaches, and I just want to throw a couple ideas out there and see if you have any other ideas. But one of the approaches in terms of replacing electionary communications, which is a technical term for broadcast, satellite, and cable communications to voters. One of the alternatives is, of course, old-fashioned emails. A lot of Bernie's younger people, supporters, use that, emailing their folks and say, "Hey, you gotta pay attention to this guy. He's actually doing something that's going to help the country." So there's that element of communication, which is very old school. And my understanding is young people just aren't that into email, even though a lot of Bernie supporters use it very effectively. But there's also Instagram. I just want to sort of tap your mind and see how you think the internet, any aspect of the internet, social media or otherwise, can be used to replace or supplement a candidate's ground game using just the internet.
Well, apparently Russia was able to, topple Hillary Clinton's bid in an election with
$50,000 worth of ads, right?
Yeah. So if those crafty Russians can come up with, these amazing stellar Facebook ads for $150,000, we're in business. I agree with you, man. The social media thing is strong. That's powerful. Like it really is. So the email, yes or no, I suspect it's a combination between social media and the candidate themselves. Like yeah, I think another part of this that also needs to be talked about is the fair elections or honest elections. And I think if you're talking about the left and the right, neither one of those sides really full well believe that the elections are fair in the way that those elections are perceived with, they proceed with.
The media. You were talking about this with Kelly last night.
Yeah.
And as I was listening to it today, I wanted to jump in and say, yeah, hey, but obviously it was too late then. So one thing we want to put on the contract for American Renewal, and I do want to loop around to CFAR here toward the end of this conversation. One of the things we would like to put on this contract is a mandate from Congress for hand-counted paper ballots in all 50 states and D.C. Right, as the primary way votes are counted. Not that they can't be scanned and used in machines and all but the official count has to be hand-counted paper ballots. So we'll know unofficial results the night of the election, and it won't be, in some cases, a day or two before we find out what the official results are, the certified results are based on hand counting.
I would like to add something to that, though. I would say automatic recount, if necessary, meaning the person can appeal to a recount. And without all of this gamesmanship, it's like one of the candidates I want to recount, and they're like, well, you're going to have to give us $20 million if you want to recount. It's like, how are you charging us $20 million?
It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd, especially when the government has so much money they can afford, $5 million or $10 million, whatever it costs to do the work of a recount. The parties and individuals and contributors, donors shouldn't pay to make sure the results of our democratic system are accurate. That should be a function of the state.
That's amazing that they do that. Like, that's mind blowing. Like, it's almost as if politics and even the elections kind of miss the point of the entire politics and elections. So, like, the point of politics is not just politics; it's actually to get stuff done. And the point of elections is to figure out who the public wants to be in that office. If that requires a recount, it requires a recount. Like, I'm amazed that they game the system in this way where they make it difficult to have those things.
Oh, I'm not amazed at all. It's the whole system's rigged top to bottom, and part of the reason we need a revolution is to unrig that system. So we're looking for, just to come back to this, we're looking for polls that indicate people do not trust the electoral system, particularly the electronic systems. And if we can find polls that show 55, 60% or more of the public do not trust the electoral systems that are in place, especially with regard to electronics, whether it's a scan machine or communications from polling place to the central computers or the central computers themselves, which many of them have these gem files. I don't know if you've seen the fractional voting video that's out there. That's terrifying. If you have the master key, you can get into any one of those gem file computers in the country and change the results. Right? You want Trump? Yeah, a little algorithm he runs, and boom, you got the outcome you want. So all these things indicate that electronic machines are just not reliable from a legitimate outcome perspective. So if you find polls like that, please share them with us, because we'll change that. Now let's look back around to CFAR. You thought it was a pretty good idea. I just want to sort of lay out, because it has a relationship. I think it's awesome. It has a relationship to the Democratic Party. And you were sort of asking Kelly about how she thought about how these reforms, and if the DNC accepts those reforms or rejects those reforms, how do you think, how would she respond, and how does she think other people should respond? And our position is around CFAR or else is, look, Democrats, it's the same thing as Bernie or bust. It's leverage. Look, Democrats, you either pick the CFAR candidate in this primary, and I just recruited one here in my congressional district this week. I've been working on this. We have like 8 people running, and I've been working on it for 3 months. And I finally had to go back around and start over again because we slightly modified the contract itself. And on second look, Rick Gallant, a union leader and high school teacher, decided to sign the CFAR. So he is our CFAR candidate. And so we want to figure out how best to convey to the Democrats throughout this congressional district, if you do not support Gallant, regardless of what obstacles are out there, regardless of whether the DNC accepts these rule changes or not, if you don't accept Gallant,
you lose.
Tom Reed, the Republican incumbent, is going to get reelected because we're just not going to support someone who refuses the CFAR. Let's call it the C-near candidate. We're trying to think of some cruel insult to call the Democrats who refuse to. Oh, we lost Jamarl.
No, I'm back.
Should be popping right back in. There he is. We're trying to think of some epithet to call candidates who refuse the CFAR, like you're a C-near candidate, or if you can't CFAR, you might just be a neoliberal.
Oh, that's funny. No, I love this idea. I've been screaming about this. Look, my love of this idea, I have to be honest, is a little self-congratulatory. For like 2 months, I've been screaming the same thing of don't vote for anybody who doesn't represent your interests, because don't reward bad behavior. It's not grading on a curve. Ultimately, they have no interest of changing anything if you turn around and just vote for them regardless of what they'll do. I've my camera. Hold on.
Yeah. A good time with the.
Once again, I'm going to change the camera strength. I'm going to take it from 720. Maybe that has something to do with it. This thing of it's like, stop supporting people who don't represent your interests. It's like, why, if you're going to vote for Democrat regardless of the situation because you're scared of the Republican, why do you expect the Democrat to change? Like, why do you expect the party to fundamentally change itself if, regardless of what happens, the world could come to an end and you'll still be willing to vote Democrat purely because you're terrified of Ted Cruz on the other side?
Well, not only that, but it goes back to what Obama was doing. Lost you again.
Good. I'm listening.
And you're here. It goes back to this, Obama pushing TPP on us, Clinton pushing the NAFTA on us. The fact of the matter is, these neoliberal Democrats are more dangerous than Republicans. This whole idea of the lesser of two evils, that neoliberal Democrats are lesser danger to working people than Republicans are, it's just a fallacy. At least the left understands Republican are the bad guys. They think Obama, there's so many people, I miss Obama. Oh my God, I wish Obama was still president. Why? He was trying to transform the United States into a corporate entity through the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Why do you want Democrats like him? It's truly astonishing, the low level of understanding people have toward people like neoliberal Democrats like Obama. So we've lost Jamarl again. Maybe I have to wrap this up. It is near the hour time we wanted to put on this. So I want to thank Jamarl for joining me, even though he's not here to say thanks for having me on board. Here he comes.
The camera is not going to be as good, but this is the camera that came with the computer itself. Let's see.
Well, as it was, because I wasn't sure you were coming back, I did start to wrap this up. It's been about an hour. I think it's been a great conversation. I'd like to do it again sometime, maybe on your platform or
absolutely.
Something else.
I totally bring you on.
Yep, and thanks for having this conversation. I think it's been fruitful. I think some good will come out of it. Hopefully, some insight. People can share this. It's important to spread the word that there are peaceful revolutionaries strategizing how to transform this corporate state into a democratic order again. And I don't even want to say again, we're not going to make America democratic again. We're just going to make America democratic at some point for the first time.
Can I say one thing about the Obama thing?
Sure.
I agree with you. So people, they're like pining over him. And I think what it is, they're accustomed to that particular soothing mannerism. It's like this kind of, he has a soothing demeanor. It's like, but what was he doing? Like, I understand that he made you feel okay. He made you feel great. But what was he doing in that office? And was it fundamentally different than what Trump is doing in that office? Like, yes, there are differences in a sense of a matter of degrees. But if you're talking about the policies that will move the country to the right with people thinking that the country is perfectly okay, it's the soothing aspect of the Democrat that gives people this idea that, okay, this is perfectly okay. The world is going great. Oh my God, we have a Republican. The world's falling off a cliff. And it's like, dude, we've been moving in this direction for both.
Right.
You just close your eyes and you pretended that the world was great while you had the Democrat. And now you get the Republican.
Well,
honest face.
I mean, I'm not even sure who's the bigger con man here. Trump, who ran anti-establishment, and here he is doing basically neoliberalism on steroids.
Pretty much.
Or Obama, who spoke like a progressive and governed like a Republican. Both of them were con men.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, honest, it's like you run on this platform of hope and change, and you essentially take on Bush policies with a minor tweaks to the way that the policies went. I mean, you pass Obamacare, which was essentially just Romney care. It's,
right. You start with hope and change and end up with, God, I hope he changes.
Everyone kept saying, well, in the second term, he's going to rip the chains off. He's going to be amazing in the second term. He's going to be free to be the president that he's always wanted to be. Not so much. Not so much. No.
That's why. I mean, in the end, you talked about in the interview last night, and CFAR is representing a line in the sand.
Yeah.
Here we are. Here's what we'll support. You either support what the people want, and CFAR is a populist agenda. You either support what the people want or screw you. We're just not going to support you. And if we have to, and this is what Kelly was alluding to, in 43 states where the write-in option is available, we can, even if we have to put our finger on the computer screen, trying to get my finger up high enough, and sign the contract, with our finger on the screen, and then go to the polling place and write in our own names. And what we're actually hoping for by November of next year is that where there are no CFAR candidates on the ballot of any party, that people will actually rise up and say, I'll run as a write-in candidate.
Yeah.
And if Rick Gallant, the CFAR candidate here in this district, doesn't win the primary, I may end up running as a protest vote.
Go ahead.
Just to bury the neoliberal Democrat who wins the primary. If a neoliberal wins, I will run as a write-in candidate just to help the Democrats lose. That's what CFAR or else is. It's not just a pro-CFAR position. It's screw you. If you guys can't accept the CFAR candidate, if you can't accept the populist candidate, we're going to make sure your candidate loses.
Yeah.
It worked with Bernie or bust.
It has to be a position. And just to put a fine point on it, people like to make this argument that Obama was stifled the entire way, that the president of the United States was somehow the weakest person on the planet and couldn't get anything done. And it's like he came in with the House and the Senate, a supermajority in the Senate. What did he do in regards to the unions? Meaning when Scott Walker was bashing the heads of unions in Wisconsin, what was he doing? Did he pass the Employee Free Choice Act, allowing unions to form easier throughout the United States? He said he was going to do it. He didn't do it. Did he pass the public option? He said he was going to do it. He had the votes to do it. He could have pushed to do it. Did he do it? No, he didn't do it. What about locking up whistleblowers? The moment that Trump gets in that office, the first thing people say is, we got to protect the whistleblowers. We have to protect the whistleblowers. They're going to go after whistleblowers. Obama used the Espionage Act to go after people who were showing waste, fraud, and abuse. More than it had been, in the last 50 years or something to that effect? He put Chelsea Manning in prison for showing the military gunning down a Reuters
journalists.
Yeah, he didn't even know who it was. Who forced? I don't understand. How did the Republicans force Obama to kill 90% civilian, have casualties, up to 90% of the people who he's murdering abroad when he was bombing these countries without constitutional authority to do so.
I don't want
understand.
to belabor these attacks on Obama too much, but what got my attention is when he basically ordered the assassination of an American
Citizen, yeah.
No due process.
None.
Right? In violation of the 5th and 14th Amendments. I mean, how high of a crime does it have to be before you start talking about impeachment?
And then, you know, the wild part about it,
argument. Everyone's upset because, Putin murders journalists. Well, Obama murdered Americans.
Murdered Americans.
No
And
due process.
by the way. And his child.
He could have tried him in absentia, and I would have accepted that. He didn't even do that. It was a committee decision. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and kill this guy. What?
And his kid. He killed his daughter and his son also.
Right.
And mind you, the other kid was an American citizen. And I don't know if you remember the argument that he made to do this. He sent Eric Holder out. And Eric Holder made this argument that due process under law doesn't necessarily mean the judicial branch. That the president, for the most part, has authority to murder civilians abroad. Think about that. The president of the United States is coming out saying, I have the authority vested in this office to murder civilians abroad that are American citizens. We don't need
It's crazy. I'll tell you, it woke me up, and I did start working with a few other people to suggest impeachment because I wasn't worried. I didn't think Joe Biden was any worse than Obama. He's a neoliberal, like Obama was. In this case, in Trump's case, Mike Pence is worse. I think he's more scary. He's more scary than even Trump. So I draw the line here. I don't think we should impeach Trump. Jamarl, thanks for joining me on the Revolt Against Plutocracy Facebook page. I appreciate your time. Appreciate your insights.
I want you on my show. I want you on my show at some point also.
Sure. We'll set that up. Appreciate your time. Thanks again.
No, man. Thank you. I appreciate this. I'm sorry for the technical issues, but I appreciate being here.
Revolt Against Plutocracy won't just be covering the news about the necessary revolution in the United States. Sometimes we'll be making the news. If you want to stay on top of the revolutionary actions and strategies of grassroots, genuine progressives, and our allies, please subscribe to our YouTube channel today.